We've developed a two-phase consultation process to gather public and stakeholder input into the plan. Phase 1, from mid-May to mid-July, is our listening and learning phase, a chance to educate, to inspire, and to engage a broad range of citizens and stakeholders, to better understand barriers and opportunities around changing travel behavior, and to generate discussion and debate about what kind of ideas could work here in Vancouver. In the fall, we'll report to Council on the results of this consultation and begin more detailed plan development. Phase 2 of the consultation will launch early next year and is an opportunity to dive deeper into specific transportation policy directions and options. We're aiming to present a final plan to Council in July of 2012. Once approved, we'll initiate work on a more detailed active transportation master plan, the city's first ever. It's important to understand that we're talking about a transportation plan for the City of Vancouver, not the whole region. We're only one city in a region of 21 municipalities, and we don't control everything within our boundaries. Transportation is complex, and issues can extend beyond municipal, regional, or even national boundaries. And there are many players involved with overlapping jurisdictions. Some things are largely within our control, like our public rights of way, street infrastructure, and much of the built environment. Other things fall under regional, provincial, or federal jurisdiction, like transit, ports, and regional infrastructure planning. Our role in this case is that of a partner, a stakeholder, an advocate. Even with our limited city jurisdiction, the opportunities here are tremendous. The ability to act directly on things that we control, like streets, sidewalks, and public spaces, to advocate and partner with outside agencies on things beyond our jurisdiction, to support other municipal, regional, and provincial plans, to provide leadership, both locally and around the world, and to empower our citizens and improve quality of life. As we develop the transportation plan, we're not starting from scratch, but building on our successes of the past and linking with other city projects and initiatives. The Greenest City planning process in particular engaged thousands of residents over the past year or so, resulting in some high-level transportation strategies and lots of detailed ideas for us to consider as we develop the plan. I'd like to spend a few minutes sharing some of these ideas, but remember, this is just a starting point for the discussion. First, although this isn't a land use plan, we recognize that land use and transportation go hand in hand. Good land use can reduce the distance people travel and support walking and cycling by bringing people closer to their daily destinations. Certain density thresholds and patterns of development can support higher transit use and even new transit investment. Creative approaches to transportation and housing choice can help address housing affordability in Vancouver. The transportation plan won't result in a new zoning map for the city, but it might suggest some land use directions. We could map out various amenities to determine missing elements that could make a neighborhood more complete, for example. At the very least, the transportation plan will support emerging and future land use plans. Walking will continue to be our #1 priority. We recognize that almost every journey, whether you walk, bike, take transit, or drive, begins and ends on foot. So we're looking at ways to make walking in Vancouver safer, easier, and more enjoyable. This could mean better pedestrian amenities, things like wider sidewalks, pedestrian lighting, street furniture, wayfinding, and better weather protection, as well as designs that work for people with special needs or mobility challenges, smooth rolling surfaces and sidewalk ramps, for example, accessible bus stops, and safer road crossings. It means addressing significant gaps and barriers in the network, missing or inadequate sidewalks and crossings, and bigger gaps too. When's the last time you saw someone cross the Granville Bridge with a stroller? We'll focus on improving pedestrian safety, particularly in our busier or more dangerous intersections. In some cases, we might want to do some quick hits on the more obvious actions. We've already started to install pedestrian countdown signals and speed readers in high accident locations. This photo shows an example in Chinatown. This plan is an opportunity to think creatively about our city structure and street network. We want to build high-quality, pedestrian-friendly streets and sidewalks that feel safe, interesting, and comfortable. At the same time, we recognize that streets aren't all the same. Some are part of the transit or truck network, for example, while others have potential as specially designated greenways. Commercial streets should be lively spaces that attract people and support local businesses. We might end up with a range of street typologies that recognize different functions and opportunities while supporting local character. We'll also look at potential structural changes, for example, exploring options to remove some or all of the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts. And we're thinking beyond roads and sidewalks. We might look at expanding the use of waterways for moving people and goods, for example. We're interested in thinking creatively about streets and public rights-of-way to build a culture of walking and active transportation. For example, expanding programs and infrastructure to support public space improvements, both temporary and permanent. We're already building on the success of summer spaces in Rediscover Granville through our Viva Vancouver initiative. This is an image of Granville Street during the summer closures last year. Perhaps we could launch a Pavement to Plazas pilot program to transform road space or on-street parking into mini plazas or patio space. This image shows an example from San Francisco, where on-street parking was transformed into a parklet. New York City has a similar pop-up cafe program. Or you could imagine taking a neighborhood street and closing it from the commercial street to the lane, which not only creates a community gathering space, but could also help calm traffic and protect neighborhood bike routes and greenways, while still allowing access to the lane. This photo shows an example from our own West End. Car-free corridors and pedestrian priority streets are also on our radar as possibilities. This is an example from Malmö, Sweden. We'll be looking at ways to make cycling and other forms of active transportation feel safe, convenient, comfortable, and fun for people of all ages and abilities. This means developing a complete cycling network with a range of facilities. For routes on busy arterials or commercial streets, that could mean separated routes with some kind of buffer between bikes and moving traffic. For neighborhood routes, it might mean enhanced traffic calming, like reduced speed limits or diverters to discourage car-through traffic. It also means improving end-use facilities, for example, secure covered bike parking at transit hubs and other key locations. This image shows an example at a train station in Germany. And on-street corrals that increase bike parking while freeing up sidewalk space for pedestrians and vendors. We've got a great first example of that at Commercial and 6th Avenue in East Vancouver. There's a lot we can do to educate and encourage. For example, supporting school programs that teach students to cycle safely in traffic, and working with the school board and province to make cycling skills a standard part of the curriculum. As much as possible, we also want to design facilities so that they work for other types of active transportation too, including wheelchairs, scooters, and strollers. The Transportation Plan Update directions for walking and cycling will feed into our more detailed Active Transportation Master Plan, which will be developed when this plan is complete. They could also support future public realm plans in a major way. Transit improvements are critical to the city's future. Although we don't own or operate the region's transit system, we can support improvements to transit in a number of ways. We'll continue to work with partners to support improvements to increase capacity and ensure service that is fast, frequent, reliable, fully accessible, and comfortable. Delivering high-capacity rapid transit in the Broadway corridor is a top priority for us. Earlier I mentioned that we'd achieve most of our 2021 targets from the 97 plan. Broadway is the one area where we're falling short. Even with a bus running every few minutes, we don't have the capacity to meet rising demand. While the Broadway corridor is our number one priority, we know that transit is squeezed throughout the city, so we'll be looking at other potential improvements as well. Better local bus service, streetcars, and other kinds of service too. The city can help by protecting corridors for future opportunities, and by working with TransLink. This plan will help direct city input into the next Vancouver UBC area transit plan. We can advocate for new financing mechanisms such as vehicle levies and congestion pricing, which could not only help fund transit, but also send pricing signals that support sustainable modes. And we can build a great transit-supportive public realm, things like bus bulges, as well as queue jumpers and lane and signal priority where that makes sense. We're looking at ways to make it easier to drive less, or even to live a car-light or car-free lifestyle. Progressive parking policies are one approach. Some specific ideas for consideration here include further encouraging or even requiring parking and housing costs to be unbundled from each other. This lets you save money on housing by not buying or renting parking if you don't need it. Most people don't realize it, but a single underground parking space can cost upwards of $40,000 or even $50,000. Better managing curb space to reduce congestion caused by people cruising around in search of an available space, which accounts for up to 40% of traffic in some cities. This is an image from San Francisco, where little sensors in the road provide real-time information on when a space is occupied. It's part of a pilot program to variably price parking up or down depending on use, so that there's always a 15% vacancy. If you need a space, you'll find one. We're thinking about parking as a district resource, so that if one building has excess parking, then the building next door can tap into the empty spaces as a resource. The building where I work, at Cambie and Broadway, is a good example of an overparked building. The lower levels are almost always empty. Other actions could include expanding car-sharing support programs, advocating for legislative change to support things like pay-as-you-drive insurance, and working with TransLink and other partners to increase telework, livework, and other programs that reduce the need for trips. Even with an increase in walking, cycling, and transit, there will still be vehicles on the road for the foreseeable future. Adoption of clean vehicles will be critical to successfully meet our 2020 greenhouse gas targets. We'll continue to look for ways to support the shift to low and zero emissions vehicles through things like requiring charging infrastructure in new buildings and developing retrofit programs for existing ones. Taxis are an important element in a multimodal city. Vancouver was one of the first cities to adopt low emissions requirements for taxis. We could look to go even further by supporting fully electric taxis through plug-in stations around the city. Maintaining safe and efficient movement for goods and services is essential to a functioning, thriving city. We'll continue working with partners to develop a sustainable urban goods movement strategy that supports a growing economy while reducing greenhouse gas emissions through and within the city. Some ideas include protecting rail corridors and increasing rail-based goods movement capacity, such as the Powell Street Overpass, where we're partnering with the Port, CP Rail, and Transport Canada. Encouraging the right sizing of goods movement and service vehicles, including smaller vehicles that allow for more pedestrian-scale environments, and larger ones that reduce CO2 production for large loads. Promoting low-impact goods movement in urban areas, using low-carbon vehicle technology, for example, as well as active transportation. This photo comes from Shift, a goods movement cooperative getting set to launch in Vancouver this year. They'll be using electric assist tricycles to deliver goods in our urban core. And who knows, perhaps we could even use transit infrastructure such as trolley wires or SkyTrain to move goods during off-peak periods. This is an example in Dresden, Germany, where they do just that. The ideas we've shared today are just a starting point for discussion. You can help us by giving us your feedback and sharing your ideas and concerns. We'd like you to stay involved and help us involve others too. Visit talkvancouver.com, learn more about transportation in Vancouver, share and discuss ideas with people from around the city, and fill out our survey. And spread the word. Together we can make a great transportation plan for the city.